Wherefore Series 2, Episode 2. Some Notes on Ditchley Yat by Professor Bob Fry. It is generally allowed that there are 5 valleys in the vicinity of Stroud. Indeed, the term the 5 valleys has come to be synonymous with the Stroud area in general. What is not generally known is that there are many local rumours and stories of a 6th valley. This valley is elusive and apparently mobile, sometimes here and other times there, most times not to be found anywhere. The valley has an ancient name, Ditchley Yat, and its one settlement is the village of Ditchley. A review of historical documents will show that the valley and settlement are clearly located on 2 old proposed enclosure maps. Each map shows it in a different location, and should you choose to visit either of these locations today, you will almost certainly not be able to find the valley at either place. In a few historical manuscripts, Ditchley Yat is sometimes discussed as a fact, in others clearly dismissed as a myth. In most, it is totally absent. Historical context. Ditchley Yat always seems to have been rather an elusive valley. The earliest records appear to be in the early medieval period. In the 800s it acquired some notoriety as the home and site of the martyrdom of St. Eardwulf, famous for the miracle of the resurrection of the peas and the miracle of causing 9 trees to sing praises unto the Lord. The valley must have been far less elusive at this time, as St. Eardwulf was martyred by the Danes. It appears that they had no difficulty finding it. For about 200 years or so after his death, there was a tradition of pilgrimage to Ditchley. Pilgrims would visit the gap in the hedge where he lived, bathe in his spring and pray at the small local church dedicated to this martyr. Reputedly, the village did a good trade in selling blessed turnips to the pilgrims, reputed to cure all manner of maladies, and particularly to prevent oxen from catching measles. Remarkably, however, Ditchley and its valley does not appear in any of the land records of this time. Land ownership in England in this early medieval period was extremely well documented, but Ditchley is almost totally absent. There is one mention of the Vale of Ditchley Yat, lying equally in the hundred of Bisley, the hundred of Longtree, and the hundred of Blacklow, and subject to great disputation of ownership. All 3 hundreds met in the Stroud area, and this might give an idea of the location of Ditchley Yat. Then again, it might not. Ditchley does not appear in the Domesday Book. This is remarkable, considering that it contained a prosperous church and shrine, and would seem to be eminently taxable to the Normans. It seems that the valley had continued with its elusive nature established in pre-conquest times. In the early 1300s there is a sudden change. Ditchley abruptly appears in the records of the local lords of the manor. Strangely, there is no mention of the church of St. Eardwulf, but the serfs of Ditchley would appear to be paying their taxes to the manor of Bisley. One can only assume that the local reeves had, by remarkable diligence or other means, managed to locate and visit the valley. One can only surmise that Ditchley suffered under the plague in the 1350s, and records continue up to 1377, the year of the universal poll tax. Each lay person over the age of 14 was to pay a tax of 1 groat to the king. Records show that several attempts were made to collect this tax from Ditchley, but tax collectors were unable to find the valley or the village. Ditchley Yat had vanished again and has remained mostly completely hidden, or at the very least elusive or nomadic to this day. There were 2 attempts to enclose Ditchley Yat, and the production of maps based on that is interesting. Surveyors would work for 2 or 3 days to produce the enclosure map, and then apparently be treated to lots of beetroot wine by the villagers, only to wake up in a field not in Ditchley and unable to find it again. This happened twice. One resulting map shows Ditchley Yat as a steep-sided offshoot of the Toadsmore Valley, and the other as a very broad vale feeding into the Nailsworth Valley between Worcester and Innsbruck. Contemporary maps show that there is no space for such valleys in these locations. Folklore notes. The Tales of the Vallis Sextus of Stroud is an excellent source on the valley, written by Septimus Archibald Spodling, an early Victorian clergyman who was fascinated by the local stories, sayings and folklore about Ditchley Yat. We learn from this book that there are many quaint local tales told by the older people of these parts about the village of Ditchley and the valley of Ditchley Yat. Tales abound of peasants of old who took a wrong turning on their way to some local market or other distraction, and found themselves at Ditchley Fair instead. Invariably they are welcomed, given copious amounts of beetroot wine to drink, and secure a remarkable bargain, usually a magnificent horse or cow in exchange for the basket of eggs, apples, or whatever goods they had about their persons. Merrily they depart and stagger away, leading their newly acquired beast on a rope, only to find, when they reach home, all they have acquired is a sack of turnips. Some tales add that these are the most delicious turnips they have ever tasted, but turnips nonetheless. Those who attempt to return to Ditchley to complain about their purchase find that it has seemingly vanished, and try as they might, it cannot be found again. An interesting variation of this old tale is one Wat of Sapperton. He was taking a bag of his own turnips to market when he found himself in Ditchley Fair. His clearly inferior turnips were mocked, and he couldn't sell them. Nonetheless, after much beetroot wine, he staggered home, dragging his turnips behind him, only to find that when he reached home, his turnips had vanished, and in their place he was leading a splendid milking cow.